If you want to find out how to get an LLM to generate a high-quality OpenAPI document in a single shot, stick around because my guest today is going to show you exactly that, as well as a whole workflow for designing, mocking, and documenting a new API. Emmanuel Paraskakis is a veteran of the API industry, having worked at companies such as Apiary, Oracle, and SmartBear, where he was the VP of product for their API design and collaboration tools such as Swagger Hub. Now, Emmanuel is consulting on API product management and best practices, as well as teaching other product managers how to develop best-in-class APIs for their organizations. So, Emmanuel, thanks very much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you, Martin, and thanks for having me here. I'm excited to show you what I've been working on.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. We've been doing a lot of videos around, this kind of topic, playing around with a lot of LLMs, playing around with OpenAPI and LLMs, digging into some of the things that can happen. But I think today you're going to help take us a little bit deeper into how this can work for people when it comes to actually jumping into using LLMs and OpenAPI inside of the API lifecycle. Do you want to give us an idea of what it is that you're going to tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been working on the API lifecycle and specifically around API design and building APIs for quite some time. And, one of the things that's been really difficult is it's great to have an API description such as OpenAPI as the center for everything that you do and as the reference for everything that you do. But the actual language itself, putting together the document, is not an easy task. You have to sit there in an editor and write and go back and correct yourself. And that takes quite a bit of time. So today we're going to talk about how you can maybe take away some of that toil and do the writing of OpenAPI with an LLM. And as a result, I think you're going to see that you'll get much more precision and adherence to standards. So let's jump in, and what we'll show is the first part of the life cycle where you could be, let's say, a product manager, where you want to have an idea of an API, make a prototype that you can go out to some users or customers and have some discovery conversations with them and tell them, hey, what do you think? And they'll give you feedback. You'll come back, incorporate that feedback, and iterate around that. And then later, you can think about whether you're going to productize or develop this API or not. What I've done is I've used OpenAPI's ChatGPT. And the model that I want people to use, first of all, this is the free tier of ChatGPT. So you can go and use free tools for everything that we'll see today. What I want you to do is make sure you've clicked on the search and the reasoning. So that makes the model able to access external data, but also to think about what it's going to do much, much better. And to make things quicker, I've generated already a prompt and I put it in a repo that you can see here. And I've tried to put in the prompts everything that I think a good API should have. So the prompt is more of like a system prompt where it tells you about the standards and the RFCs and the conventions to follow. Here's what it looks like. And of course, everyone watching this can go follow along and use this prompt. So we're telling the LLM that they're an experienced architect. We want the LLM to generate OpenAPI 3.1.0. It's kind of a good, fairly, it's not the latest version, but it's a good version to follow. And then we're telling it things about standards. And at some point, we're telling it about what style guide to follow. I've excluded this here, but people can add in their own style guide. So I'm just saying, hey, follow accepted standards. And then I'm telling it this is a JSON API, use UUIDs, use some good naming conventions. Here's what I want you to do about security and schemas and parameters, reminding it about good use of status codes. I wanted to use problem details for errors. A bit of information about rate limiting, which is going to become out of date as a new RFC about rate limiting comes in. And then some things that I've seen models occasionally mess up. So I've included some information to kind of keep them on the straight and narrow. And then finally, I'm telling it this is going to be a JSON document And I want you to make sure you're following the spec and you're following JSON schema. And then this very last line is very briefly about the API that we're going to build. Now, when you go into production with this, you're obviously going to tell it a whole lot more about your requirements. But in this case, we're just going to let the LLM improvise and think about what it wants to do.
There's a lot going on inside this prompt right here, which is interesting because if you've seen any of the other videos that I've done previously, the prompt that we use is relatively minimal. That's kind of on purpose as well, just to see what the base level of what an LLM can actually achieve when it comes to designing OpenAPI. And I think the responses that I've got from the majority of models tend to be relatively similar when they do their first pass. And it's very much based on like a base level of information that they tend to know. For instance, they typically end up only going for OpenAPI 3.0.0 as well. So, I see you're pushing it to go further on there as well. But a lot of the stuff that I see in what you have here in your prompt is actually the stuff that typically ends up getting missed a lot of the time, and that they just don't necessarily tend to go for, whether it's because they don't think it's important or it just doesn't necessarily feature in as many documents that it's been trained on. So it's really interesting to see actually some of this stuff, because I've seen this missed out completely by many LLMs at this point. So it's nice to see that you've gone down the route of very much enforcing that standard and that style in this prompt.
Absolutely. I was definitely inspired by your videos to do this. And my idea was, look, I know I can tell it very little, and I can use tools to give me feedback about the quality of my API, and then give that feedback back to the LLM and go around, maybe 3 iterations, and then it would come to a very good quality of OpenAPI. And what I'm trying to do here is kind of short circuit that and see if I can do it in a 0-shot kind of way, kind of have one go and see how much quality I can get out of it. All right, so I'm just going to copy this prompt here and just feed it as is into the LLM. I have search and I have reasoning on, and I'm just going to go down here and just change my domain. What API are we doing today, Martin?
Oh, you know what? We could try with the prompt that I've used in the other videos, which is the link shortening application called Mini Links.
Okay, link shortening API. Okay, so we're just going to go with this. We'll see what name it comes up with. It might come up with a name like Mini Links or some other name. So what we're trying to say is, look, this is a link shortening API. I'm telling it on purpose to use small schemas, make it simple so we don't spend hours looking at the prompt, and just do a get, post, put, and delete, and use an API key. So let's ask it to do it. It's reasoning, it's thinking, and it's saying, hey, I'm designing your link shortening API. And here it gives us some indication of its thought process, that it understood the prompt, what it plans to do, and so on. As we'll see, it does take a little bit of time. It does take a few minutes, and that's okay because it's doing the best it can. Of course, once you go to the paid versions of the models, you're going to get a little bit better performance. You're going to get a little bit better reasoning, and so on. So that's always a good idea to do. If you can, go use the paid versions of all of these. And the other thing I'd say is, if you're going to put your prompts in a GitHub repo like I did, you might try to integrate GitHub and the LLM via its API, OpenAI, and the other LLMs have APIs, and kind of make a more automated kind of workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. You could definitely make this happen at the end of a GitHub action. That would be cool.
And as we can see here, it started writing OpenAPI. Looks like OpenAPI to me. This is great.
Looks like it. It's definitely JSON.
It's JSON. It's doing a bunch of things. I do see components here, so it's kind of following what we told it. I see UUID, so that's good. It's not completely going off the rails. It's talking about its errors. that is going to show us. So that's great. And as you can see, it's quite a big and long file. So it's trying to incorporate all the things that we told it inside of the prompt. Here's our schemas, and it's done. And now it's telling us what it did. Here, I followed your instructions. Let's go take a look at that. So what I can do is I can copy over this entire file. And the next step, the next thing I want to do is I want to make sure it's valid JSON and it's also valid OpenAPI. So we'll just copy this file as is. And what I've got up here is Swagger Editor. It's a product I've worked on in the past, so I know. But obviously, you can use any other kind of OpenAPI validator. So all I'm going to do is just paste this in here. I don't want to convert it into YAML. Let's leave it as is. And as you can see, it's rendering what the OpenAPI is saying. A couple of checks here. I can see it has a servers object. I can see it's created the paths and the methods that I wanted it to do. You've got a get links. You've got a post to link, so you can create your new link. And here it's kind of understood what I want to do. It's asking for us for the URL. It's returning JSON. It's giving an ID, a shortened link, and so on. And here's some of the rate limiting that we asked it to do. So all in all, it looks like it's doing a fairly good job. So what I wanted to also see is that there's no syntax errors. And if you look very closely to the window down here, it's giving us some warnings. It has this example versus examples warning, a deprecated item in OpenAPI that keeps coming up. I could go to my prompt and fix that, but I'm just going to ignore it for now. I found that it doesn't really affect what we're doing. So next step is I'm going to save this as a JSON file to my desktop. Okay. And once I have it as a JSON file, I can move on to use it in other tools in the lifecycle. I could perhaps from here render documentation. I could do many things, but what I want to do today is check how good, what the quality of the API is. And there's a few tools I can use. One of the tools is RateMyOpenAPI by, I believe you guys, Zuplo. So
I've heard of that, yes.
It's RateMyOpenAPI.com, and what I can do is basically just drop in the OpenAPI file. So I'm just going to pick it up from my desktop and drop it in here. And you know, I could do many things with this, but I'm just going to do a very simple workflow where I send the file and I'll just have it email my results to me.
But also, like you were talking about, if you were building this into, you know, more of a Git-based workflow, then you've got that GitHub action as well that could also run, you know, as soon as the prompt has been completed by the LLM and you have that file, you could automatically pass it over to get checked. And to be honest, at that point, it could probably also get into a cycle where it could take the feedback from the API and start applying that as well, and just back and forth until it reaches some kind of, you know, golden 100.
And you should use the automation. The CLI works really well. The GitHub action works well. And also the API returns JSON as a response, which you can feed right back into the LLM and it understands it. But it'll also understand the visual output that we're going to show here today. So drum roll, let's see what our results were. It's a 93. It's not that amazing.
That's pretty strong out of the gate, though. Like 93. Just for those watching, if you haven't seen any of the other videos that we've done on the channel where we get LLMs to write OpenAPI, the first pass for most of them is typically around somewhere between 40 and like 60 in terms of score, and only after like giving it feedback have we managed to get any of them to kind of get up to this point. So as an out of the gate, 95 is already a real solid score. Really solid.
Absolutely. And I've seen this go up to 100, and it depends on many things. It also depends on the model that you're using. It depends. I I know that if you use one of the paid tiers of the models, you'll get like very consistently you get 95. Now, we can feed this information back into the LLM and keep on going, and it'll bring it up to 100 pretty much almost every time. You've shown that in your videos. The other thing we can do is if we're consistently getting a specific error, here we're getting this information error, we're getting a warning. For some reason, it didn't define security, even though we told it to. We should be able to go back and fix our system prompt and make it better so it doesn't happen over and over again. But I can tell you, out of the box, if you're using a paid version of these models, you'll get a much better results every time.
Yeah, but actually, you know, this is a really strong, really strong outcome for the free aspect of this as well, right? Is
Absolutely.
that, you know,
Just
managing
to brag,
get to that
here's
point
one
without
that I
having
got
paid anyone
before
any money.
with 100.
It is possible, just for those that have never managed to get to this
Absolutely.
point, or see 100 on RateMyOpenAPI. It is possible.
And you know, just to complete our goal and objective that we have here, we're saying, okay, well, we got the API to a reasonable condition, a reasonable quality. It's missing a few things. We could go fix those, but this is only a prototype. So what we want is our product manager to take the API, render it into a mock that can be seen by others, and take it to the customers or users for feedback. And one of the things we can do here is use one of the mock servers. Mockbin happens to be really, really good, I think. Again, all we have to do is, you know, same pattern, upload our JSON file and just hit the create button. It's going to create a mock endpoint for us. This is the mock endpoint that you know, you can copy and go over to your API client and hit it, or give it to your customers and have them hit the API, pretend they're coding with the API, and give you feedback. They might say, look, the way you're doing pagination is not the way we're used to, or not the right way. You've got this problem here, or give me the paths in a different way. I want some nested paths, or I want you to use this other method, and things of that nature, or include this field, and so on. What I think is interesting is that you can also, by hitting this button, you can also show them render documentation for the API. So that gives you a mini kind of online documentation that, again, you can share with your users. And it's actually usable. You can go test the mock, send in a request to the mock, and it comes back with the examples that were included in the OpenAPI document. One of the things we told it is make sure you include examples everywhere.
I mean, that's great. You know, just like even being able to get to this point, you've got, you know, everything that you need to hand this out to anyone to go play with it and give you feedback, right? Like it's, you know, the experience, with the exception of it hitting an actual server, is all the way there, 100%.
Absolutely. And, you know, you might go through a few iterations of getting feedback, doing discovery with your customers. Eventually, you might decide that it's time to come back and make this a real product. And then you can continue to use the OpenAPI file for building your API, documenting your API, testing your API. And I found even for scaffolding out user stories and diagrams using an LLM to explain to people what you need to build and how the API works. Of course, with code generation, we can speed up the process towards our, you know, ever-evolving prototype. We have tools like, for example, Replit that will understand your OpenAPI document. You can upload it to Replit and tell it, hey, build me a server around this OpenAPI document. It'll take about 10 minutes or so, and it'll build out a real honest-to-goodness server. And then continuing on in our lifecycle, we can say, kind of to close off things, before I publish the API, I can deploy it behind a gateway. And there's gateways and API management tools. I think Zuplo is one of them, where you can actually, again, upload the OpenAPI file and scaffold the gateway about which routes to accept and where to forward the traffic. So that makes it very, very easy to use just the one source of truth for the API, which should be the OpenAPI, and go around this life cycle and present people with different options and different tools that they can use while maintaining the integrity of the API.
Absolutely. I mean, you can take the document once you've tweaked it, once it's been tested, once it's been through that ideation and design process, you can then just take it and put it directly into something like Zuplo, and start applying the security policies on top of that, and pretty much instantly you're going to have a production API that's behind a gateway that's super secure, deployed to the edge, so very, very quick in all different geographies. And then, because you also have that OpenAPI document, you could go out and start generating SDKs that will then be available for people to use to hit the API that's behind the Zuplo gateway.
And the great news is that for all of these things, it's all synchronized to that one OpenAPI document. So your documentation is synchronized to your implementation. It's not going to drift because you're driving it through OpenAPI. And if you need to change what happens with the API, you can go around the circle once again. Go show your customers your proposed changes, come back, build it, deploy it behind the gateway, and go around the circle continuously.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So are there any other steps in here that you want to talk about, or any other tools that you put into this lifecycle chain?
Absolutely. So I think the more you can do to validate with the human in the loop and with using deterministic automated tools. Remember, what comes out of the LLM is non-deterministic. It can change. It can hallucinate. It can make mistakes. It depends on a lot of things. So you got to have, first of all, the human in the loop. And second, you got to back this up with deterministic tools. And we saw one of these deterministic tools, which is RateMyOpenAPI, which gives you that quality score. There are others out there. There's a really good one called API Doctor. There's linters such as Vacuum and Spectral that allow you to manipulate these rules and change the rules to suit them to your own particular organization's needs, and turn things on and off so that you can have a repeatable checking. And you can and should pass the OpenAPI through all of these tools, ideally multiple of these tools, even from different vendors.
Well, look, Emmanuel, thank you so much for walking us through this. Really appreciate the approach that you've come up with here, and actually going through the process of prompting and reprompting to get to a point where you've developed a prompt that even for an API that you didn't know you were going to ask about today, can still manage to get a 95 score on RateMyOpenAPI. So if folks want to check that out, the link for that will be in the description below.
If you want to know more about this, if you want to go through a class that where we do this hands-on, I do have a couple of courses that I'm doing out on Maven. We'll include links, but one of them is called API Fundamentals for Product Managers. It's for product managers that haven't shipped an API before, and the other one is called API Product Mastery for experienced PMs. I just finished this class today with a bunch of amazing PMs, so you can take either of these classes or both of them in sequence, and that will also include a discount code for folks watching. If you use the code Zuplo, all caps, you'll get a good discount out of these courses.
Fantastic. Well, look, Emmanuel, thanks so much for walking us through this. Thank you very much for taking the time to do it. We very much appreciate it. And of course, do check out Emmanuel's courses if you found this useful and if you found this interesting. And of course, if you did, do feel free to give the video a like, and of course, subscribe to the channel for more videos on API best practices and development. We'll see you soon.